a useful session for you and really tell you a story of what has become a real problem in our space, and hopefully a story that I can bring to some kind of a happy ending by talking to you about how to address this problem, how to deal with it, and why it is particularly important that we have this conversation now, because we truly are in an era of enhanced social compliance scrutiny. You heard from the first speaker today, right here, about all the legislation coming down the pipe and already on the books that is making more and more, imposing more and more requirements to do social compliance due diligence, and all of that is actually going to make this problem worse if we don't find a good way of addressing it. So that's sort of my overarching thought. But I think it's going to be helpful for you to get a sense of the organization whose viewpoint you're hearing, in case you're not already familiar with us. But then we'll dive right into the story itself. I'm going to talk to you about where the problem came from, why do we have audit fatigue as a reality in our space these days, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about this era that we're entering, enhanced social compliance scrutiny. Why is now the time that this becomes a particularly significant conversation to have? And then we'll get to the meat of it, how to avoid audit fatigue. What is it that we can do that will get us to a better place, because we are in this era whether we like it or not. Happy to take questions in the end if you want, or have a discussion off-site, offline, whatever is easiest for you. So let's get going. As I said, just to give you a very brief overview of my organization, WRAP, Worldwide Responsible Accredited Production. We are the world's largest independent, factory-based social compliance certification program that is focused on this industry. Apparel, so products, related sectors. We specialize in this space because we do believe that there is a value in being specialists in an industry that is particularly targeted and particularly subject to scrutiny from legislators, from civil society. We have developed an expertise in this particular sector. Our industry focus may be limited to sold products and related sectors, but our geographic focus is unlimited. The W stands for worldwide. We inspect and certify factories all over the world. And this is sort of the nutshell descriptor of our organization. We are an objective, nonprofit team of global social compliance experts. That's who we are. What we do is promote safe, lawful, humane, and ethical manufacturing throughout the world. That's kind of the mission. That's our main offering. And how we do it is through certification. That's our primary product. We certify factories after inspection. And also through education. We consider it part of our mission to spread the gospel of compliance, as it were. Which is why I'm always grateful to shows like this that provide a platform for an education series to speak to the industry and educate all of you. And we thank you for your time to listen, because it's extremely important that folks that are in the industry take the necessary steps and are aware of the challenges and the resources available to address them. We particularly position WRAP as a program of choice for industry. Yes, we're a non-profit, but we're not an activist NGO. We're not out there looking to name and shame. We're not out there looking to cast the industry in a bad light. We want to work with industry because we believe that's where the actual power to make change lies. That's where the decisions are made. That's where you decide how you're going to set up factories, how you're going to source from them, what are you going to require of them. That's where you really have the power to make it. So we position ourselves as a program of choice for industry, partnering with trade shows, partnering with trade associations. We're here in Canada. We're a partner CSR organization for the Canadian Apparel Federation, CAF. We'll be hearing from its executive director, Bob Kirk, later today and tomorrow. We're also the program of choice, the official CSR partner for the AAFA, the American Apparel Footwear Association, the biggest player south of the border here. So we're engaged with industry to make the change that we want to see. I won't go through details here. We're a certification program, so you might want to get a sense of what is it that we certify. It's purely social responsibility and environmental customs as an add-on. We don't really do product certification. You heard earlier today from someone who talked about sort of testing for the product. We test for the working conditions that product is made in. And these are the principles that we base our audit on, making sure that the workers are there voluntarily, they're being paid for properly, they're working in safe and healthy conditions. and so on. The last thing I'll put up there for you about RAP is just a sense of how worldwide we are. We are headquartered in the US, in Arlington, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. But we have offices in Hong Kong, as well as in Bangladesh, brick and mortar office and full-time staff, as well as full-time staff, although no actual offices in Latin America, in Europe, in 3 different places in India, as well as in the major social destinations in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and also as a organizer in Pakistan. So you can see we have people on the ground in all the major social destinations for this industry around the world. All right. I said that was the last thing I would put up there, but I lied. There is one other slide I wanted to bring to your attention, just to back up my claim that we're the largest program out there. This is what our 2002 last year looked like in terms of factory applications to get certified by RAP, our top 10. And again, no surprise that we are the top 10 apparel exporting countries of the world. We received just under 3,500 applications last year, 3,492 to be precise, which we're very proud of. It was our biggest year ever. Right now, kind of middle of the third quarter of the year, there are a little over 3,400 factories currently holding a RAP certificate in about 42 countries around the world, altogether employing just about 3.4 million workers. So that's a really large footprint that we are very proud of. Now these factories and these workers all suffer from this scourge of audit fatigue. The idea that if you're a factory and you have to be audited to meet certain standards for a buyer, that you have to do so for each one of your buyers, time and time again, multiple times a year, this is not a sustainable situation, and that's what I want to spend the rest of my time talking with you guys about. So why do we have this problem? Why is it that we have audit fatigue? Well, we get audited for all kinds of other things, right? You have to, if you're a publicly traded company, you have to audit your financials before you submit them to your regulators. But you only have to do that one time with an independent organization. Why are they not getting audited multiple times? Well, it's because the origins of audit fatigue trace to an unfortunate reality in our space. Social compliance as a concept really came to be in the late 1990s and early 2000s into its sort of prominence. Because that was when you were seeing a lot of activist NGOs go out there and conduct hidden camera exposés and do these sort of name and shame campaigns against brands and retailers who had just adopted the outsourcing model and weren't necessarily keeping a good eye on the factories that were making their product. And some of these factories weren't very good factories. So there was a lot of this stuff happening in the 90s. Those of you who were around back then probably remember the Kathy D. Gifford incident and how much of an impact that had on the space at large. It destroyed that brand. So this got social compliance audits going as a concept. Brands developed their codes and they wanted to inspect against them. But we got off on the wrong foot, right? Because the impetus was a negative one. Right? It was about brands protecting their reputation, protecting themselves. It started off the whole audit in a sort of adversarial setting. Buyers and manufacturers saw each other on opposite sides of the one had to protect themselves from the other type of thing. And the buyers who set the rules created it as sort of an imposition. Here are my rules. You, manufacturer, must obey these rules if you want to have business with me. And now that I have these rules, I got to check that you are obeying these rules. So it was a bit of a us against them mentality that got us off on the wrong foot and made brands and retailers develop their own proprietary code. Each one felt like they have to protect their turf, create their rules, and when they set up their rules, they have to create the army in-house to enforce those rules. And then you had your own proprietary database systems in which the results of those audits were inputted for you, the brand, the retailer, to make decisions for you guys to make. So this was how things got going, because everyone felt the need to react immediately and quickly. And so by the time collective efforts like RAP got set up and established, you had too many of these guys just creating their own fiefdoms already and resulting in this approach that we have to do it my way. We're not going to recognize other programs. We're not going to share our results. And so that's why we have audit fatigue. Every brand retailer felt that they had to go out there and do it themselves, wouldn't recognize other programs, and got going immediately to react to a negative because not open to share this stuff. That's how it got started. This is now early O's we're arriving at. About a decade into it, into the mid-O's, they recognized that this is a problem. It's not a smart way of doing things. We're all auditing the same factories, essentially the same code, using different approaches that are minuscule in their distinctions. We probably shouldn't be doing it like this. They recognize that. And so there was an attempt to harmonize standards in the late O's and into the 2010s. The problem with that attempt to harmonize was that they really, again, did it wrong. There were two flavors, two types of attempts. The first attempt was, well, can we come up with a universal code? Can we create a code that everybody follows, right? And then we only have to do one audit against that one code. And that didn't work because not all values are universal. Brands and retailers have certain things they want to emphasize. They want to distinguish their ethos from each other. So yeah, you can agree on some technical stuff, but on the value proposition, you're not going to have universal agreement. So that was never going to happen. So they said, all right, phase one failed. Let's try, instead of a universal code, can we create an equivalency program where we don't have a universal code, but we match codes against each other and benchmark against a single standard of doing things. And that also failed. They all failed because they've all tried to find a single solution. Harmonization works if everyone does it my way. Again, that's not this industry, better than any other industry, understands the importance of sizing. Right? One size does not fit all. You can't have a single approach that every buyer in every stage of their existence can apply to every manufacturer in every stage of their maturity. So it's simply not going to work. That's all just in this one way does not work. So we've got the problem, we've recognized it for a problem, we don't yet have a solution that has emerged in the 2010s. And now we're going into the 2020s. And I want you to hold this thought for a second while we transition to the current era of enhanced social compliance scrutiny. And let me build the story up from that end before we merge the two narratives and talk about solutions. While this space was developing, governments initially weren't engaged too much in supply chain due diligence activities. They kind of set the rules for minimum wage, for work standards, not so much in supply chain due diligence. But in the 10s and into the 2020s, governments started to increase the level of activity when it comes to supply chain oversight requirements of brands and retailers that are in their jurisdiction. They focused on companies at the headquarter level, because that's kind of their big piece. You're an American company, you're headquartered in America, we have American laws that apply to you, same thing with Canadian companies headquartered in Canada. But recognizing that these companies aren't doing all of their business in the jurisdiction, they said, all right, you're in our jurisdiction, you're a Canadian company in Canada, we're going to pass rules that apply to you in all your supply chain activities, no matter where they take it. Vietnam, Bangladesh, China, whatever. The activity level took various forms: legislation, regulation, trade policy. You can decide who turn off or turn on for who's favored nation status, who gets free trade access, free access to your country. They were trying to regulate the supply chain activities that way. The first wave of these laws in the early 2020s 2010s, were mostly reporting laws, disclosure laws. Right? They didn't tell you what you're supposed to do. They just said, whatever you're doing in your supply chain, you gotta tell us. Put it on your website, tell us what you do with your suppliers. This generally is best captured by a law that's about 12 years old now in the US called the California Supply Chain Transparency Act, or SB 657, as someone referred to it. It didn't have any proactive requirement. There wasn't anything you were supposed to do, but whatever it is you were doing, you were supposed to report. This is what I do when it comes to changing my suppliers. theory, you could say I do nothing. As long as you say you do nothing, you were meeting the law, because all you were supposed to do was say what you do. That would be a bad answer, but you get my point. There was nothing other than reporting that was required. And then we saw in the late 2010s, the UK Model Slavery Act, the Australian Model Slavery Act, they are both the same flavors of this reporting requirement. Canada did some interesting stuff in this regard as well with the reporting requirement, the establishment of an ombudsperson. That's now really taken up some more active engagement. But again, the idea was that they're simply going to be reaching out to brands and retailers to report on their activities. Nothing proactively required. But that is changing. And you heard from Renee earlier today. We are now entering in the early 2020s this era of MHRDD, as it's called, mandatory human rights due diligence. And Europe is on the forefront of this, passing laws, and again, you heard the European directive, the CSDD directive, Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. That is now going beyond simply reporting requirements, but imposing actual proactive auditing and remediation requirements. It's no longer enough to tell me what you're doing. I am now the regulator telling you, you must do regular audits, you must report on non-compliances found, you must remediate them, you must put in a grievance mechanism, and now report on all of that. And if you don't, you're in violation of the law. So we've heard already that this is happening. There is one on the books in Germany already in effect as of the 1st of this year. And then the EU-wide one that we mentioned is likely going to come onto the books next year before going into effect the year after. You're also seeing a big increase in enforcement activity across the board with regards to using customs regulation to prevent goods entering into various jurisdictions, the US and now Canada as well, that are suspected to be made with forced labor. In the US, Customs and Border Protection are issuing withhold release orders, WROs, that prevent entry into the stream of commerce from goods that they suspect might be made with forced labor. And as I said, Canada now has a law on the books with the same general principle. So that you're seeing supply chain security audits now focusing on forced labor issues as well. Because to get into the country, you're going to have to prove not just that there's no non-manifest cargo, but that the workers were working voluntarily. So where does that leave us? Right? The consequence of this new era that we're in is increased legislative, regulatory, and policy engagement by governments. And the NGOs are really leaning into it themselves. Civil society organizations are campaigning hard in favor of such groups, and they are going global in their campaigns, not simply targeting big multinationals at their jurisdiction of domicile, but also recognizing that the big factory groups that they source from are themselves publicly traded in, say, India or wherever, and they're going after those guys too. So a lot of campaigning, a lot of attention to the issue of forced labor, and brands and trade associations and manufacturer groups are being forced to react, are being forced to proactively address these issues. And really the bottom line is that it is now, if it wasn't already, increasingly clear that you have to have effective supply chain, social compliance, programs as part and parcel of doing business. This is no longer an afterthought, no longer a nice thing to have. It is absolutely a must in order to do business. Because for practical reasons, ensuring that your company is not targeted by regulators, and for reputational reasons, ensuring that you're not being shunned by consumers or being, again, the target of an NGO for a campaign, you have to make sure your supply chain is socially responsible. So, two narratives now merge. Right? Remember we talked about where we were on the audit space. Now you've got this increased importance of audits, and so naturally the consequence is you're going to have more audits. And we're seeing that. We've seen this become much more of an important thing, much more of a necessary thing. But remember our topic, right? What this means is it actually makes audits worse. Right? We've seen that factories are having a higher number of audits that have to go through in the last year than they did years before because of these rules. So what's going on, right? Why are these companies still using their own proprietary programs? What are their excuses? Well, this is where the narratives merge, and we recognize that when we talk to the brands and retailers that still insist on their own programs, they have a couple of things that they call. They say, you know what? I want to use my own staff because I can trust my auditors. I know I've trained them. They're reliable. You know, there has historically not been a standard for auditors. That's why we use our own. That's one excuse. The other excuse is data. We need the data to be formatted a certain way because we have to process it, process it in a certain way. We want to be able to understand what it is that we're getting from these factors. So these are the two excuses that you hear most. But even now, with these excuses, they're recognizing that it's a higher cost for them to run their own program. Not to mention an extra burden on manufacturers because they're having to go through multiple audits. They recognize this. And increasingly they're recognizing that the laws of the books, which are calling out credibility and independence, call into question their ability to do their own audits because they're not independent. Right? They have a vested interest in these supply chains. So they're recognizing that this is going to be a challenge. So this brings us to the present day and our narrative and our message to them that there are no more excuses because auditor reliability is no longer a problem. Yes, when we first got going 25 years ago, there was no standard, there was no professional body, but there is now one. It's been knocking around for about 6 years. It's called APSCA, the Association of Professional Social Compliance Auditors. And I have the good fortune of actually being the chair of the board of APSCA. That's testing auditors, creating a standard for profession, and we now have over 2,300 auditors certified to do these audits. So if you're getting a CSCA, you know you're getting a professional. You don't have to be worried about that. So that excuse is no longer there. The other excuse is data, as I said, and that's also one that technology has come to the aid of because now you can get data from any audit program and through an API or through a conversion process, have it be translated to whatever format you want it to be to fit your proprietary data system in-house. So that is no longer an excuse. And RAP has plenty of experience taking RAP audits and translating it to whatever question order, whatever information sequence that a buyer needs to have for the buyer to process it in their own way. So what this means is the legislative mandate for credibility and independence becoming clearer. You can't do your homework and check it too. Somebody else has to be the one that validates your supply chain, not you. There is therefore increasingly hard to justify the extra cost of doing audits in-house with their own people. That's the reality that these folks are waking up to now. Which means we now have the emergence of a solution to audit fatigue. My favorite part of the story, the happy ending that we're getting to. I mentioned there were attempts to harmonize in the 2010s that all failed. And one consequence of that failure was that the term harmonization came to be a loaded term. It now had negative connotation. So when we at RAP wanted to come up with this new paradigm for addressing social compliance audit fatigue, I didn't want to use the word harmonization, another harmonization sense. I wanted to create a new concept. And so I settled on this fake word that we invented called synchronization. Because in my mind, the message is, don't try to do it all just one way. That is not going to work. That's fail. When you go to a symphony, all the instruments on stage aren't playing the same notes here, but beyond. All the way down to raw materials, all the way across your value chain. So if you're going to be doing more audits, you need to be making sure that you're doing so much more efficiently. And that's what ultimately avoiding audit fatigue is all about. So this is probably the single most important slide that I'm going to share with you. What is the message to brands and retailers and to manufacturers for audit fatigue? Well, Mr. Brand, Mr. Retailer, Mr. Buyer or Ms. Buyer, whoever you are out there, look around. If you're using your own programs, you're a dinosaur already. You need to move on. Start by benchmarking your program against the existing current program. RAP is happy to help you with that exercise. You will find a lot of overlap. Right? There's no way that you have something that you're looking for that RAP doesn't already cover. More importantly, ask yourself the question, are you already in a supply chain that's got coverage program? What percentage of your suppliers currently have a RAP certificate? Again, odds are you're going to find a high overlap. We have 3,500 factories in our program. Then you can do a deeper dive and see how do they match up. If you're in a RAP certified factory and you do your own audit, how do those results compare? Again, we will back our program any day of the week and you will see that you're getting the results that you are satisfied. More importantly, what's it costing you to do it yourself? This isn't a free exercise, obviously, right? And the cost isn't simply your own overhead. What's the cost you're imposing on your suppliers? We are in the middle of that RAP of doing a very comprehensive survey of factories to see how deep audit fatigue goes. And we're not yet ready to share full results because the survey is ongoing right now. But preliminary results show us that even in the immediate level, factories are spending almost $10,000 a year just dealing with audits of buyers. And this isn't staff overhead costs. It's just dealing with the audits themselves as they come up. That's a cost you're imposing on your manufacturing base, Mr. or Ms. brand or retailer or buyer, by assisting on your proprietary program instead of accepting a RAP certificate or another program. So measure those costs and see how much you're going to be saving yourself and your suppliers by taking on the synchronization mentality. And manufacturers, you're not off the hook either. Right? Too many manufacturers willingly endure these audits because they feel like they have no choice. The buyer is asking for it, they're going to have to do it. I understand where you're coming from, but you are not without agency. You're not without power. Push back. Push back on the buyers and say, well, why should I do your audit? I have a RAP certificate. Here's the report. Here are all the details. You're asking the same questions. Why should I do your audit when you've got the answers right here? And if you have the need for some help in this regard, reach out to us. We're absolutely happy to go out to bat for you with your buyers if they're being recalcitrant or not aware of RAP. Make sure that you show existing certificates and encourage acceptance because that is how you're going to reduce it. That is how you're going to play the part of making supply chain due diligence more efficient. As I said, this is probably the most important slide that I have to share with you. So to turn it around and sort of bring it to a close, why is RAP such a great solution for the audit fatigue issue? We are as robust a program as we can hope to be involved with because we're a certification program. Right? We don't simply do an audit and give a report that the buyer has to then decide how to interpret. We're checking to see whether objective evidence shows that a standard has been met, and if it has, we will certify that. That certificate becomes something you can show the buyer to meet their requirements. And many buyers recognize RAP, many buyers require RAP. Heck, Walmart, the world's biggest retailer, we're one of the programs that they accept, and that's a great story, by the way. Walmart, up until about 5 years ago, used to be part of the problem. Used to be one of those buyers that insisted on their own RS program, responsible sourcing program. Didn't matter who else had done audits, what certificates you had. If you were selling to Walmart, they had to send somebody from their team to audit you, and you had to pay for the privilege. Walmart recognized that that's not a viable model. It was costing them too much. It was not giving them any credibility because they were the folks starting their in-house. And so they were the early converters to the synchronization concept of saying, you know what, if there's a RAP certificate, if there's a handful of other programs that we recognize, we will accept that, and we will not do our own audit. That's the right approach. That's what we encourage. We are, as I said, an independent third-party certification program, so you will have that credibility that meets the laws that are being put out there, because it's an independent program, we don't have any vested interest in the supply chain. We extensively train our auditors, we require them to be refresher trained, and we absolutely insist on APSCA certified auditors for RAP audits. So again, we're getting the standard, we're getting the audit reliability addressed there. We have the independent review process of the report on top of it, so there is that professional touch once more. And as I said, it's a certification program. So if there were non-compliances found, you have to address them and correct them before you can be certified, which is what the laws require now. This MSRDD and CSDD laws. It's not enough to audit and find problems. You have to remediate them. And this program will get you that remediation because it's built into the certification process. We do surprise inspections. We're making sure that the factories that have been certified stay compliant over the course of the year. We subject them to random unannounced audits, which we call post-certification assessments, PCAs, that are done at no cost, by the way. It's not an additional expense to the factory or the buyer. We build it into our pricing because it's our own quality control check on our part. All right, so let's conclude this and maybe let's save time for questions if we have any. The bottom line is that the era of enhanced social compliance, scrutiny, due diligence requirements is upon us, whether we like it or not. These laws are on the books. There's only going to be more of them, not less. There's going to be more jurisdictions covered, not less. So we have to be ready to deal with them, right? Legislation is mandating human rights due diligence. It's no longer a voluntary program. You have to do it, right? And therefore you have to do it as cost effectively as possible, because otherwise it's really not going to be a viable proposition. The way to do it is to no longer use your own program, because there are no excuses left to justify the use of your own program. They only increase audit fatigue. They don't add value to the chain, to the manufacturer, and certainly not to the buyer in question. So avoid audit fatigue. Utilize the handful of existing independent programs like RAP instead of insisting on duplicate proprietary audits. That's the message. That's the answer. That's the happy ending, hopefully, to the story that we are now living